Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and today I am bringing you a joint review for the films The Killing of a Sacred Deer and The Florida Project. I finally got around to seeing both of these films while they were still in theaters. I was really anticipating, really looking forward to watching both of these. Just things hadn't quite worked out right. But today I pulled the doubleheader, and so here we go with a couple of quick joint reviews for you today. The Killing of a Sacred Deer looked kind of crazy. Right off the bat, on the trailers, I knew I was getting into something a little bit weird, a little bit like auteur, and I was here for it. It looked just crazy enough that I would love it. And I have to say, overall, I enjoyed most of the film. In particular, the second act of this movie, really good. Like, that's when it is at its peak. And for 90% of the third act, I also found it to be really good. But man, that first act is rough to get through. It took so long to get anywhere. And honestly, it was exasperated by weird, stilted dialogue in which the director purposefully, it was done very purposefully, had the actors deliver it in the most monotone, disconnected way possible. This seemed like a technique to keep the audience at bay and at arm's length away from the character so we didn't become attached. But it really was just like, painful. Like, it felt like I was watching a new version of The Room, if I'm being honest, because the dialogue didn't feel real, even in the slightest. So it created kind of a surreal world, like a Stepford Wives type world out there. And when it fully embraced the kind of like crazy notion of what was actually happening and really getting into the whole paralysis business and why it was happening and what was going on, it was fantastic. This is when we got into like high concept art, and it really worked very well. And I think it worked all the way up into the last two scenes. First of all, the movie ends inside of like a restaurant, and I'm not going to say anything else there, but that scene could have, and in my opinion, should have just been left out of the film. It wasn't needed. It added, I guess, a little bit of atmosphere to leave you on, but I thought it was a really weak way to end the film. And the scene directly before that raises questions. But stick a pin in that, because this scene in particular we're going to revisit in a little bit when I talk about the end of the Florida Project, so we'll have a spoiler section at the end of this video. But I will say you can see Colin Farrell and Nicole Kidman in particular just bursting at the seams, trying to give a good performance, and just being straddled with this stylized directing and script that really limited what they were able to do with their characters. But Barry Keoghan was fantastic. This was amazing work from him. And I do think Colin Farrell and Nicole Kidman accomplished putting on a really strong performance. They just had to fight so hard to do it. So overall impressions and kind of quick review of The Killing of a Sacred Deer is that it was a high concept drama, thriller, in many ways dark comedy that focused so heavily on being art and artsy that it got in its own way. The art is supposed to be there to enhance the story and enhance the film. In this case, I do think it got in the way, so I would give this one a rental. Now, as for The Florida Project, I think I enjoyed this one a bit more than I enjoyed The Killing of a Sacred Deer. So it also suffered the problem that I wasn't really invested in the first act of the film. But that second act is flawless to me. The second act I thought was so amazing. And then the third act was so good up until the last sequence. I think my main issue with the beginning for The Florida Project is I'm not like somebody who loves kids. I don't love to be surrounded by kids. I don't hate kids by any means. I'm just like, okay. And in particular, poorly behaved children are not really something I want to sit with for 2 hours long. So sitting in this atmosphere with these kids just running around, being ill-behaved, being rude, and supposed to be seeing it as like kind of cute and endearing, I didn't see it that way, and I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, these children. But once it starts really delving into the emotional aspects to this, it hit me good. It really got to me once everything started settling in. Once it wasn't so like whimsical and fantastical and we started getting into the drama of what was happening, it got so good. And it was so stark and real amongst being like kind of whimsical and fantastical that I thought it worked perfectly. And Willem Dafoe is fantastic in this film. The girl is also very good and she gets a lot of praise. But for me, Willem Dafoe was, by and large, the heart of this film, and he kind of took the place of empathetic moviegoers, and I really just identified to his character, and I thought it was an amazing character brought to screen. And then we're going to get to that ending and negatives shortly, because that all is going to fall under spoiler territory with The Florida Project. However, I also would give The Florida Project a rental, more because I don't think it needs to be seen on the big screen. I think it does a lot of really amazing stylistic choices from the director. This film uses its style to enhance the substance of what is going on, and I thought it used it brilliantly. I thought it was directed so gorgeously, and the writing actually is really strong as well in this one. So for pure quality reasons, I would definitely give this a matinee, but it doesn't necessarily warrant the big screen movie prices. So I think you can wait for this one to come out on rental, but I would definitely check it out at some point. So spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! I will be going over the endings of both films and going over spoilers for both films. If you don't want to know anymore, I've given my reviews. I love you all, and I will see you on the next one. Still here? Then let's dig right into it. So for The Killing of a Sacred Deer, the film didn't seem to know where it lied on the scale. Is it completely like fantastical and mystical and otherworldly, or is it a part of Earth? And I think it's very inconsistent on how it kind of like slips in and out of that. And actually, it's the parts where we're supposed to believe this is the real world that work the least. When it is in its big revenge plot and we are part of this like curse or this witchcraft or whatever it is that's taking place, it's so good and it works beautifully. But, like I said, when we're in the real world and they're talking to each other and they're actually supposed to be having some sort of dialogue, it's horrible. Like, I just thought the dialogue was so bad. And again, I know it was a style choice for the director, but it just got in the way of everything. And I thought, even as we got into the good parts, he added in a lot of dark humor and really strange, really funny stuff randomly throughout the film, but it all just kind of made for this film that was all over the place to me, honestly. But then we get to that ending. We get to the point where Colin Farrell has to decide, who do I kill? Which one of these three people am I going to have to kill? Clearly, he can't decide. So what does he do? He puts a ski mask over his face, gets out a shotgun, and spins in circles, stops and shoots. So this raises a question amongst the audience. I am going with the more logical answer, and the one I'm hoping was the intent here, is that he could see through that ski mask, and he was just doing it as a crutch to make himself feel better. And so when he shot his child, he had an alleviated sense of, that's just by chance, and I didn't have to choose. However, if it's intended that that was a, legitimate, just open shot, shooting off 3 shots, there is no way he would have stopped and shot any of those people in a place that would have killed them. Maybe he would have grazed them, or he would have just kept shooting things off of a random shelf, because there is no way. Come on now. And then that leads me into a bigger point. I'd like to know, what are we dealing with here? Set up at least something about what is going on. I had this problem with Happy Death Day recently, and I have it real big here. How is this kid able to put this hex, able to put this revenge plot out there for Colin Farrell? Is he a witch? Is he a warlock? Does he cast spells? Is it just this world we live in where revenge is inherent? I don't know, and we don't know. We're not given much backstory. We're not given good details about the people prior to any of this happening. And it all leaves you just up in the air with, how did this happen? Why is this happening? How is this seen as justice? And I'm glad the movie brought this up itself, but I think the filmmakers kind of went along with the idea of justice. Why couldn't Colin Farrell just kill himself? Because he has to live with killing a loved one, I'm guessing, is probably it. I don't know. But then we end up with the most unjust result in the end. It all just kind of like jumbled. And then again, that end scene just felt labor intensive to me. It felt unneeded, sitting there in that stupid diner or whatever. I was like, oh, God. And then we go over to the Florida Project. I think this does it to a much lesser extent. Much lesser extent than something like The Glass Castle. But it really starts to glorify child abuse in many, many ways. And it's another film that puts Child Protective Services in such a horrible light. In literally a moment that is they're doing the right thing. Like, very clearly the right thing. So this film is pretty much shown mostly through the eyes of a child. So that's why everything feels so whimsical and everything feels so, like, fantastical. And it's so beautiful in capturing poor people's perception, and in particular, poor children. And the fact that they don't know or they don't care that they're poor, and just making the best out of what's around them, and just having fun. And I thought that is where this film worked so well, and why it was so heartbreaking, because she was just having fun. This is the only life she knew. She didn't get to choose this life she was put into. And just watching this child be a child and make the most out of it, and enjoying such pleasures that, you know, a lot of other people take for granted, was beautiful, actually. Like, just gorgeous. But wow, this mom was a terrible person. Like, just straight up. And it kind of shows, like, a replicable cycle in this film of nurture being a heavy influence on children and the way you're raised. And you already saw it with this young girl, which was also heartbreaking. Her adopting the behaviors of her mother, and her mother doing whatever she could to survive and provide for her child. Oh, but once we get to the end, it's kind of just like, ugh. And then, speaking of that ending, so she yells a big ol' F word into the camera, which already was a huge stylistic departure of anything we had seen in the film up to that point. Then the little girl runs over to her best friend to tell her goodbye. Obviously, she's upset. She knows that she's being taken away from her mother, and she is, you know, having like a breakdown, having a life crisis like breakdown over what's happening in her life. Her whole world is crumbling. The film then completely changes in style into this really manic, like crazy, sped up, like handheld guerrilla style shooting. And if I'm being honest, it kind of feels like it turns into a Disney ad. Like, that's what it felt like to me. So I think there is some hidden symbolism there, probably about, like, childhood happiness, I don't know. But they literally run right into Disney World. And we get the, like, Mickey Mouse heads, we see, like, the Disney knockoff store on our way in, and then we get to actual Disney World. And then it ends. I mean, so the, like, literal message is, Disney, where you go to escape all of life's real problems. And that was, like, why it felt like an ad to me. And it felt so strange and abrupt and weird after we had had this beautiful, moving scene with this little girl and her best friend. Like, we're literally coming off of the heaviest stuff in the film, and then it's like, Disney! So I didn't like it. I didn't go for it. And it didn't match or fit the rest of the film at all to me. Because even when we were in whimsy and fantastical stuff of, like, looking at cows and getting ice cream and playing in abandoned houses and all of these, you know, like, weird things that they're just loving, to then go corporate with it and go to, like, a legitimate, like, place, I don't know. It didn't work for me. I found it too abrupt. I found it really strange. I didn't like the ending of the Florida Project, really, at all. So those are my quick, spoilery reviews and discussions for The Killing of a Sacred Deer and The Florida Project. I would really love to discuss these two films with everyone else. If you enjoyed these endings better than I did, if you just in general enjoyed the films, love the films, if you've seen them and you also didn't like the endings, or you didn't like the films and you don't quite get the hoopla, any and all opinions, let them be known in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I do love you all so much for your continued support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!